Lyra had never expected that the night she was dragged to the village square to be mocked would become the night her fate collided with the most powerful family in the realm. She stood near the fountain, wrapped in a worn blue shawl that barely hid the trembling in her arms. The villagers whispered loudly, not caring that she could hear every word. Too big, too slow, too weak. She kept her gaze on the cobblestones, focusing on the cool dampness of the night air against her cheeks. But when horse hooves echoed through the square and torches lifted, the entire village fell silent. The vampire king had arrived, and with him, his 2 children. Prince Arlen and Princess Mira jumped off their dark mounts before the soldiers could help them. Their eyes scanned the crowd with the same urgency someone might use to find a dropped treasure. Lyra felt their gaze slide past her, linger, then return like a hook catching on the hem of her existence. Arlen pointed directly at her, his voice sharp enough to slice through the cold air. "Father, we want her." Mira nodded eagerly, golden eyes shining. "Yes, her." The whispers immediately rose behind Lyra like a wave. "Too fat. Why her? What could the royal family want with someone like that?" King Theron rode forward, cloaked in shadow, his presence heavy like a storm about to break. His pale hand lifted, commanding silence. Lyra dared to lift her eyes. She had heard countless stories about him, powerful, feared, distant, but seeing him up close unsettled her in a way she didn't expect. His eyes, dark and ancient, seemed to study not her body, but something beneath it, something she had never known anyone to see. 3 paragraphs have now passed, but before we continue, I want to invite you to something very special. Subscribe to the channel and leave your like. This helps me see that you support me and enjoy my stories. And comment below which city you're watching from. Now, let's continue. The king dismounted with a slow grace, as if time bent around him. The villagers lowered their heads, but Lyra couldn't move. She felt her breath tighten when he stopped in front of her. He didn't touch her. He didn't even lean close. He simply looked, and for the first time in her life, someone's gaze found something in her that wasn't an insult. "What is your name?" His voice wasn't gentle, but it wasn't cruel either. It carried weight, the kind that demanded honesty. "Lyra," she whispered, feeling her voice crack like a shell. Mira stepped forward, her excitement barely contained. "Father, she's perfect. She can help us." Arlen nodded firmly. "She's strong. I can feel it." Lyra blinked, confused. Strong? She had spent her entire life being told the opposite. Strong wasn't a word anyone had ever placed beside her name. She looked at the children, their expressions sincere, almost desperate. It didn't make sense. Why her? Why tonight? King Theron's jaw tightened. He turned to the villagers, his cloak billowing like a shadow with its own pulse. "This girl comes with us," he announced. "No harm will come to her. Anyone who challenges this decision will answer to me." A ripple of fear spread through the crowd. Lyra felt dozens of eyes press against her back like pointed fingers, accusing her of taking something she didn't deserve. She wanted to protest, to step back, to remind everyone, including herself, that she was nobody. But when she tried to speak, Mira gently took her hand. "You don't understand now," the princess whispered, so softly only Lyra could hear. "But we've been searching for someone like you." Lyra's heart pounded. Her skin tingled where Mira touched her. The villagers' whispers grew sharper, angrier, cutting at her like cold wind. Yet the children's hands on her arms were warm, steady, confident. She felt torn between 2 worlds, one that rejected her openly and another that claimed they needed her without explanation. The king looked at her once more, a flicker of something unreadable passing through his eyes, concern, maybe, or recognition. "Let's go," he said, "before it's too late." Too late for what? Lyra wanted to ask, but the words wouldn't come. She took one step toward the royal carriage, then another, feeling the weight of every whisper behind her. She didn't know it yet, but this would be the moment her life split into before and after. The night she stopped belonging to the village and began belonging to a destiny she never imagined. The carriage moved smoothly over the forest road, but Lyra felt every shift in her chest, as if the wheels rolled directly across her ribs. She sat across from Arlen and Mira, their faces lit by the pale lantern hung above them. The children weren't frightening the way she expected royal vampires to be. Instead, they watched her with an intensity that felt almost protective. The scent of night air drifted in through the small window, cool and slightly metallic, mixing with the faint sweetness of the herbal poultice on Lyra's wrists from where the villagers had grabbed her earlier. She tried to keep her hands still, but they trembled anyway. Arlen leaned forward, elbows on his knees, eyes flicking across her face as if studying an ancient map. "You heard them," he said quietly. "The way they talked about you." Lyra stiffened. She didn't need reminding. Mira nudged her brother with irritation, though her voice stayed soft. "She doesn't want to think about that." Arlen didn't apologize. He simply continued, "They don't see what we see." Lyra opened her mouth to ask what that meant, but she didn't know how to form the question without sounding foolish, so she closed it again and stared at her hands. The trees thickened outside, their branches arching like a cathedral of shadows. Ahead, a faint blue glow seeped between trunks, pulsing softly like a heartbeat. Lyra noticed the children exchange a look, quick, loaded, almost anxious. She straightened. "What is that light?" Mira hesitated before answering. "Our home," she whispered. Or, "What protects it?" Lyra tried to make sense of those words, but they felt slippery, as if she was missing half the language needed to understand them. The carriage slowed, and the air grew colder, sharper, humming with an energy she could feel on her skin like static. When the door opened, moonlight washed over them, revealing the massive silhouette of the royal fortress rising from the mountainside. Its towers gleamed with streaks of silver, as if built from polished night itself. Lyra stepped onto the stone path, her breath catching. The fortress was beautiful, impossibly so. But something beneath the beauty thrummed with danger, like a note slightly off tune. She could see thin streams of blue energy winding along the walls, pulsing faintly, matching the glow she saw in the forest. They moved like veins carrying light instead of blood. A figure approached from the inner gate. Lady Cerys, the king's advisor, tall and elegant, with silver hair braided tightly down her back. Her expression sharpened the moment she saw Lyra, though she bowed respectfully to the children. "Your father waits in the Hall of Echoes," she said. Her gaze flicked back to Lyra. "Bring her." Lyra bristled at the tone, but followed, feeling the cold stone under her shoes and the faint scent of incense that drifted through the corridors like a memory. Every step echoed as if the castle listened to her presence, questioning her right to be there. Inside the Hall of Echoes, King Theron stood before a map carved directly into the floor, glowing with the same blue veins of light. He didn't turn when the group arrived. "Did it react again?" Mira asked, voice trembling with barely contained urgency. The king nodded. Only then did he face Lyra, his expression unreadable. "This morning, the barrier weakened," he said. "Tonight, it nearly collapsed." Lyra's confusion deepened. "Barrier?" Arlen pointed to the glowing lines beneath their feet. "This protects our kingdom. It keeps our enemies out. It keeps us safe," Mira added quietly. "And it responds only to those who carry a certain kind of strength." Theron approached Lyra slowly, so she had time to step back if she wished. She didn't. His eyes scanned her face as if searching for confirmation of something he had long suspected. "When my children saw you," he said, "the barrier surged. It recognized you. Someone like you hasn't appeared in centuries." Lyra blinked, heart pounding. "Like me? I'm no one." But the king shook his head firmly. "No, you are not no one. You are exactly what this kingdom needs, though you may not yet understand why." Lyra felt heat rise in her throat, not from embarrassment, but from a kind of helpless frustration. Her whole life, people had told her she didn't fit anywhere. Not in the village, not in her own family. And now this powerful man was telling her she belonged to something impossible. She didn't know whether to laugh, cry, or run. She steadied her breath, focusing on the scent of burning resin from the torches. "Tell me," she whispered. "Tell me what you think I am." Theron's answer came quietly, but it hit her like a blow. "You are the key to restoring the barrier. Without you, everything we protect may fall." The words settled over Lyra like a heavy cloak she had no idea how to wear. The king's voice had been steady, but the tension in the room deepened the longer she stared at the glowing lines carved into the stone. The barrier pulsed gently, a soft blue light rising and falling like breath. She felt drawn to it, the way a hand instinctively reaches toward warmth in a cold room. But she held herself back, unsure if touching it would reveal truth or expose a mistake. The eyes of the king, the children, and Lady Sarris remained fixed on her, and the pressure made her chest tighten. Mira stepped closer and took Lyra's hand with surprising gentleness. "Come," she whispered, guiding her to the center of the room. Lyra followed, though her heartbeat thudded like a drum inside her ears. When she stood above the carved map, she felt something shift beneath her feet, as if the stone recognized her weight. Arlen circled them, his expression both excited and worried. "If the barrier responded to her presence from miles away," he said, "we need to see what it does when she stands right over its core." Lyra swallowed hard. She wasn't sure she wanted to see anything. King Theron gave a single nod. The moment Lyra exhaled, the lines flared brighter, filling the entire hall with a cool, luminous glow. The air vibrated, humming against her skin as if she had stepped inside a bell just after it was struck. She lifted her hands instinctively, staring at the faint shimmer that moved across her palms. It didn't burn. It didn't hurt. It felt like a quiet recognition, a pulse matching her heartbeat, syncing with it. Gasps echoed around her as the barrier surged higher, spilling light onto the ceiling like rising mist. Lady Sarris stepped forward sharply. "Impossible," she murmured. "She's human." Theron's voice cut through the room. Human or not, the barrier chose her. Lyra clenched her fingers, trying to stop their trembling. She wasn't special. She wasn't powerful. She was a girl the village mocked for being too heavy, too quiet, too slow. She didn't understand how something made of ancient magic could recognize anything valuable in her. Her breathing quickened, and she took a shaky step away from the glowing lines, needing solid darkness instead of light that seemed to know her better than she knew herself. Mira rushed to her side, placing a hand on her arm. "It's okay," she whispered, voice full of warmth. "You don't have to understand everything now." But Lyra's doubt surged like a tide. She felt exposed, as if the light had peeled back layers she had worked years to hide. "Why me?" she asked, her voice thick. "Why would something like this choose me?" Arlen answered before anyone else could. "Because strength doesn't always look the way people expect." His gaze held no pity, only certainty. Lyra felt a lump rise in her throat at the sincerity she wasn't used to receiving. King Theron approached slowly, his footsteps echoing like distant thunder. "The barrier responds to resilience, not perfection," he said. "To endurance born from pain, not power inherited by birth. You may see yourself as ordinary, but the magic of this kingdom sees differently." His words pressed against old wounds Lyra had carried for years. She had endured cruelty. She had swallowed humiliation. She had survived loneliness. But she had never believed those things made her strong, only tired. The possibility that they meant something more left her unsteady. A sudden tremor jolted the hall. The blue light flickered violently, dimming in some places, surging in others. Theron reacted instantly, raising his hand. "The breach again," he growled. Lyra's heart spiked with fear. "Is it dangerous?" she asked. Arlen answered with a tense nod. "If the barrier fully collapses, creatures beyond the silver line will come through, and they don't negotiate." Lyra felt a chill race down her spine. She didn't know what creatures he meant, but the dread in the children's eyes was enough to fill in the blanks. Theron motioned Lyra closer. "Stand at the center again." Slowly. She hesitated only a moment before stepping forward. As soon as she reached the glowing core, the tremors eased, the light steadying under her presence. The hall exhaled, walls, stone, and royal hearts all settling at once. Lyra stared at her hands again, stunned by how something as simple as her being there could calm what an entire kingdom feared. She felt no power, no surge of magic inside her. She simply felt seen by something she couldn't name. Lady Sarris watched with thinly veiled worry. "If she is the key," she said, "then enemies will come for her." Lyra froze, her pulse jumping. Theron met her gaze with grave calm. "If you stay here, you will be protected. But you must decide if you accept this role. The kingdom cannot force it on you." Lyra looked from the king to the children, their faces filled with hope and fear. For the first time in her life, someone was offering her a place, not out of pity, not out of convenience, but because she mattered. She breathed slowly, letting the cool hum of the magic steady her thoughts. "I don't understand all of this," she whispered, "but I'll try." The king nodded once, solemnly. "Then your life changes tonight." The following morning, Lyra woke inside a room she scarcely believed belonged to her. The bed was softer than anything she had felt, wrapped in fabric that shimmered faintly when touched by sunlight. A large window overlooked the mountains, where thin strands of blue energy still drifted through the trees like mist. The scent of pine and cold stone entered with the breeze, calming her nerves just enough to stop her hands from shaking. But as she sat up, memories of the previous night rushed back. The barrier, the light, the king's words. She pressed a palm against her chest, as if that could quiet the storm inside her. A soft knock sounded at the door before it opened, and Mira stepped in, carrying a tray. Warm bread, fruit, and a cup of steaming herbal tea filled the air with comforting scents. "Good morning," the princess said, setting the tray beside Lyra. "I wasn't sure what you liked, so I brought a little of everything." Lyra muttered a shy thank you, picking up the tea. It smelled of mint and something floral she couldn't name. Mira sat on the edge of the bed, swinging her legs lightly. "Father wants to see you in the training hall after you eat. He thinks it's time you learn more about the barrier and about yourself." Lyra lowered the cup. "What exactly am I supposed to do?" she asked. Mira offered a small smile. "For now, just exist near it. The magic reacts to you, but eventually, you'll have to control that reaction." That word, control, made Lyra's stomach tighten. She had spent most of her life trying to stay unnoticed, to avoid causing trouble. Controlling anything, let alone ancient magic, felt impossible. She forced a breath and nodded anyway. The kingdom needed her. That truth clung to her like a second skin she couldn't remove. When Lyra entered the training hall, she froze at the sight of King Theron waiting beside a long stretch of polished stone. Thin streams of blue light cut across the floor in intricate patterns, glowing faintly like veins under translucent skin. The hall smelled of cool metal and incense, sharp and grounding. Theron turned when she approached. "Good. You came." His tone was neutral, but something softer flickered behind his eyes. Relief, perhaps. Arlen stood several steps away, watching with the focus of someone studying a rare phenomenon. Theron motioned for Lyra to step forward. "These channels connect to the barrier's outer field," he explained. "When you walk along them, it should react. Today we observe. Later, we teach." Lyra swallowed and stepped onto the nearest glowing line. Immediately, the light brightened beneath her feet, chasing ahead of her like rising sparks. She gasped and took another step. The reaction grew stronger. The air vibrated faintly, brushing her arms like the soft hum of distant music. She felt neither pain nor overwhelming heat, just recognition, the same gentle pulse that had startled her the night before. Arlen's voice broke the silence. "Your energy stabilizes the flow. See how it evens out?" Lyra looked down. The flickering glow from earlier draped into a smooth, steady pulse now. Theron folded his arms. "Exactly. The barrier hasn't been this stable in months." Lyra felt her cheeks warm with embarrassment. She hadn't done anything but walk. "Still," she continued, following the curve of the lines until she reached the hall's center. When she stopped, the light rose around her like a low wave, brightening the entire chamber before slowly receding back into the stone. "Good," Theron said quietly. "Now step off." Lyra obeyed. The moment her feet left the glowing lines, the barrier dimmed again, not flickering dangerously, but clearly weaker than before. Lyra felt something twist in her chest. The kingdom really did depend on her. It wasn't flattery, it wasn't a story, it was a weight she could feel pressing into her bones. She looked up at the king. "What if I fail?" Theron held her gaze without flinching. "Then we fall with you." He softened the words after a breath. "But I do not believe you will." Before Lyra could respond, Lady Saris entered the hall. Her expression was tense, a scroll clutched in her hand. "Your Majesty," she said, bowing. "There is movement along the silver line. We believe someone, or something, is testing the weakened sections." Mira stiffened beside Lyra, and Arlen's hand drifted toward the dagger at his belt. Theron's eyes sharpened. How long until they attempt a breach? Cerys shook her head. Unknown. But if the barrier continues to depend solely on her presence, they may soon realize its vulnerability. Lyra felt cold spread through her limbs. She had barely begun to understand this world, and already its enemies were closing in. Theron stepped closer, lowering his voice so only she could hear. "You are not a weapon," he said, "but you are a spark the kingdom has needed for far too long." Lyra met his gaze and found no cruelty, no expectation of perfection, only truth. She took a slow breath and nodded. She didn't feel brave, but she felt willing, and sometimes that had to be enough. Theron straightened. "Prepare yourselves," he told the children and Cerys. "Tonight, we reinforce the barrier, and Lyra will stand with us." Lyra's heart pounded, but she didn't step back. For the first time in her life, she wasn't being pushed aside. She was being asked to stand at the center of something that mattered. Night settled over the fortress with a heaviness that pressed against the walls like an unspoken warning. Lyra stood near the balcony overlooking the mountains, watching thin streams of blue shimmer across the distant horizon. The barrier pulsed faintly, like a lantern struggling in darkness. She could feel the tension in the air, sharp, metallic, humming against her skin. She tried to steady her breathing, but each inhale carried the scent of cold stone, pine, and the faint heat of torches burning below. Tonight, she would face the barrier with the entire royal court watching. The thought alone made her palms damp. Arlen and Mira joined her moments later. The princess stood close enough that their shoulders brushed. "It's almost time," Mira whispered. Lyra nodded, though her throat felt too tight for words. Arlen studied the sky with a seriousness beyond his years. "There's something wrong in the woods. I can hear it." Lyra frowned. She heard nothing, just the wind sighing through the branches. But as she looked closer, she noticed faint shapes moving between the trees. Not animals, not villagers. Something else. A chill crawled across her spine. "Are those—" she started. Arlen didn't let her finish. "They're not supposed to be that close." Before they continued, "Tell me in the comments what you think of this story so far and what you would do in her place. Don't leave the video, because what comes next will give you chills." The call of a horn echoed through the fortress, deep and resonant. Soldiers rushed across the courtyard, their armor clinking softly beneath the rising tension. King Theron strode toward them, his cloak trailing behind him like a shadow in motion. "Positions!" he ordered, his voice carrying the force of a command honed over centuries. Lyra stepped down from the balcony, her heart thudding. She felt the tug beneath her feet, the barrier reaching for her, sensing her presence even from afar. The magic pulsed weakly, as if pleading. The ritual circle had been prepared in the Hall of Echoes, its glowing lines reinforced with additional channels of light. The floor thrummed underfoot, vibrating with anticipation. Lyra stood at the entrance, watching soldiers take defensive positions along the walls. Torches flickered, casting long, trembling shadows across the stone. Theron approached her, his expression firm but not unkind. "Listen carefully," he said. "Tonight you won't stand alone. We will direct the flow, but you will anchor it. The barrier answers to you before it answers to any of us." Lyra swallowed. "What if I can't hold it?" Theron shook his head. "You don't hold it. You steady it. Let it rise through you, not against you." His words made sense in a way she couldn't explain. She felt the truth of them in her bones. Arlen and Mira stood on each side of her, their small hands warm when they took hers. "We'll guide you," Mira whispered. "Just stay with us." Lyra squeezed their hands back, drawing courage from the steadiness she found in them. They stepped into the circle together. The moment Lyra's foot touched the glowing lines, the barrier reacted, flaring upward in a sudden surge of bright blue light. She gasped, feeling warmth spread through her chest, her arms, her fingertips. The light rose around them, forming arcs above their heads like threads of energy pulled taut. The air thickened with magic, cool and dense, carrying the faint scent of rain. Lyra's legs trembled, but she didn't collapse. She focused on Mira's hand, on Arlen's breathing, on the steady presence of the king standing behind her. Outside the circle, Lady Cerys unfurled a scroll and began chanting in a low, resonant voice. The soldiers joined the chant, their voices merging into a rhythmic hum. The energy in the hall intensified, gathering strength. Lyra felt the barrier pulling on her again, searching deeper, asking for trust. She let her breath fall into rhythm with the hum, feeling the pulse of the magic align with her heartbeat. Slowly, the trembling light began to stabilize, rising in smooth waves that illuminated the entire hall. But then, without warning, a crack echoed through the fortress, sharp, like stone splintering. The blue light flickered violently. Lyra felt the barrier wrench inside her, pulling harder, straining. Her knees buckled. Arlen gripped her tighter. "Stay with us!" he shouted, his voice cracking with fear. Mira leaned closer, her forehead touching Lyra's arm. "Don't let go!" The light snapped again, sending sparks across the hall. Soldiers shouted. Lady Cerys's chant faltered. Something was pushing against the barrier from the outside. Then Lyra heard it, a low, guttural sound rolling through the mountains. Not quite a roar, not quite a growl. Something ancient, something hungry. Theron stepped forward, placing both hands on Lyra's shoulders. His touch steadied her instantly. "Focus on what you are," he commanded, his voice fierce. "Not what they said you were." Lyra closed her eyes. Her breath steadied. The barrier surged again, the light rising like a wave under her will, not perfect, not controlled, but rising because she refused to collapse. The cracks began to seal, the energy knitting itself together inch by inch. The hall held its breath as the light finally stabilized. Bright, unwavering, alive. Lyra opened her eyes, and in the shimmering glow surrounding her, she saw the truth reflected. She wasn't weak. She wasn't worthless. She was power the kingdom had been waiting for. The hall remained glowing long after the ritual ended, its blue light lingering like the fading echo of a storm. Lyra stood in the center, her breathing ragged, her hands tingling with warmth. The soldiers slowly lowered their weapons, disbelief written across their faces. None of them had expected the barrier to recover so suddenly. King Theron watched her with a stillness that felt almost reverent, though a shadow of concern dimmed his expression. Lyra wiped sweat from her brow, her heartbeat beginning to settle, but the distant growl she had heard lingered in her mind like a cold stain. Mira was the first to reach her. "You did it!" she whispered, eyes bright with relief and admiration. Arlen nodded, though he looked troubled. But something out there pushed back, harder than before. Lyra stiffened. She had felt it. The pressure from outside the barrier, like a vast hand pressing against the castle walls. It hadn't felt mindless. It had felt searching, intentional. She shivered and hugged her arms around herself. Theron approached, his footsteps echoing softly. "You held the barrier when none of us could," he said. "But I need to know how you felt it. Describe it." Lyra hesitated. She didn't have the vocabulary of mages or nobles. Her world had been made of simple things, wheat fields, quiet evenings, whispered insults she pretended not to hear. "It felt like a pull," she said slowly. "Not painful, just like it wanted something from me, like it recognized me, and I recognized it." Theron exchanged a glance with Lady Cerys, who stepped forward, her brows furrowed. "Recognition," Cerys repeated. "The barrier has responded that way only once before, in the early days of the kingdom." Lyra frowned. "What does that mean?" Cerys shook her head. "We don't know yet." The king dismissed the soldiers and led Lyra, Arlen, and Mira toward a quieter wing of the castle. The air grew warmer as they entered a library filled with ancient tomes and faint scents of parchment and dried herbs. Shelves stretched to the ceiling, each packed with scrolls that hummed with old magic. A fire crackled softly in the center of the room. Theron motioned for Lyra to sit. She sank into a cushioned chair, its fabric soft against her trembling legs. He took a seat across from her, steepling his fingers. "There is something I have not told you." Lyra felt her breath catch. She'd known this moment was coming. Truth always followed need. Theron gestured to an old leather-bound book on the table. Centuries ago, when this kingdom was founded, the barrier was created by a union of two forces, vampiric magic and human resilience. Lyra blinked, startled. Human? Saris nodded. Not every human. Only a rare few, born with a kind of strength that can anchor power far greater than themselves. The founders called them the Bearers. The word felt heavy in the air, as if wrapped in centuries of reverence and loss. Lyra struggled to understand. But why would the barrier choose someone like me? She asked, voice small. Arlen leaned forward, meeting her gaze with earnest softness. Because you survived things most people wouldn't. Pain shapes strength, and you've carried more than anyone gives you credit for. His words hit her harder than she expected. Her throat tightened. Memories of whispered insults, isolating chores, and quiet nights alone rising like ghosts. She had survived. She had endured. But she had never considered endurance something worth noticing. Theron opened the old book to a faded illustration. A woman standing within a glowing circle, her hands raised, light streaming from her chest. She was not slim. She was not ethereal. She was strong, with broad shoulders and a steady stance, her expression filled with resolve. Lyra stared at the drawing, her pulse thrumming. The woman looked like her. This, Theron said softly, was the last known bearer. She held the barrier for almost a century. Her strength kept the entire valley safe. Lyra touched the page with trembling fingers. Was she alone? Theron's expression softened. Never. The kingdom protected her, just as we will protect you. Before Lyra could respond, a distant boom rattled the shelves. Dust drifted from the upper beams. Mira jumped. Was that? Another boom followed, closer this time, low and vibrating through the floorboards. The fire flickered violently. Theron rose, cloak sweeping behind him. The silver line, he said grimly. Something is forcing it. Lyra stood too quickly, her head spinning. The barrier, shouldn't it be stronger now? Arlen answered with dread. It is stronger, which means whatever is pushing is stronger too. A third boom echoed, this one so sharp the windows shuddered. Lyra felt the barrier tug at her again, desperate, urgent, like a living thing calling for help. She pressed a hand to her chest, breath quickening. It's calling me, she whispered. I can feel it. Theron placed a steadying hand on her shoulder. Then we go to it, he said, together. Lyra nodded, fear and determination twisting inside her like two braided threads. She wasn't a warrior. She wasn't a mage. She wasn't even sure she was brave. But the kingdom needed her, truly needed her, and something in her heart refused to step back. Tonight, she would face whatever pressed against the barrier, and for the first time in her life, she wouldn't be facing anything alone. The fortress shook again, harder this time, and Lyra felt the vibration travel up her legs like a warning. Soldiers ran through the corridors, torches flickering as the air grew colder, sharper, filled with the electric tension of something approaching. Lyra hurried beside King Theron, Mira, and Arlen as they moved toward the Hall of Echoes. Each step carried the faint hum of the barrier calling to her, pulling, urging, pleading. It felt like invisible fingers wrapping around her ribs, guiding her forward whether she was ready or not. Before we continue, tell me if you would have the courage to live a story like this, or if something similar has ever happened to you. Don't leave the video, because what comes next will give you chills. They reached the hall, and what Lyra saw made her breath hitch. The glowing lines on the floor flickered wildly, flashing in unstable bursts. The barrier was fighting something powerful enough to make the light itself recoil. A deep, resonant growl rolled through the mountains, vibrating the windows. Lyra pressed a hand against her stomach, fighting a surge of nausea. It's stronger, she whispered. Stronger than before. Theron nodded grimly, stepping closer to the trembling map. And it's testing every point at once. This isn't random. It's deliberate. Mira squeezed Lyra's hand, her small, cool fingers trembling. Whatever is out there knows someone new is stabilizing the magic. They're trying to force you out. Lyra felt her pulse spike. The idea of being a target made her knees weaken, but the children's grip anchored her. She turned to the king, searching his face. What do I do? Theron met her gaze firmly. You stand in the center. You let the barrier rise through you. You do what you did before, but this time, you don't fight the magic. You let it trust you. Lyra inhaled deeply, the air sharp and cold. She stepped into the circle, her feet finding the glowing lines almost by instinct. The moment she touched them, the barrier surged upward, but it was different now, wild, frantic, straining. The energy slammed against her chest like a powerful wind. She staggered, but Arlen caught her arm, steadying her. "Breathe," he urged. "It's panicking. Help it settle." Lyra closed her eyes, focusing on the sensation. Cool, vibrating, desperate. She let her breath fall into its rhythm, slow and steady, and gradually the energy softened. The light rose, not perfectly, not smoothly, but with enough strength to push back whatever pressed from the outside. She felt it, an immense force withdrawing slightly, frustrated. The hall trembled once more, then went still. For the first time that night, silence settled over the fortress. Lyra opened her eyes, breath shaking. The barrier still pulsed weakly, but it held. She had held it. Again. Theron approached her, his voice low. "Whatever tried to break through now knows your presence, and it won't stop." Lyra swallowed hard, fear and determination coiling together in her gut. "Then neither will I." Because for the first time, she understood something clearly. The barrier wasn't choosing her by mistake. It was choosing her because she was strong enough to be chosen. The fortress remained unnervingly quiet after the barrier steadied, but the silence carried a weight that pressed against every wall. Lyra walked beside Theron down the torchlit corridor, her steps slower than before. The energy she had called upon had left her drained, her limbs heavy, her heartbeat still quick from the strain. Yet beneath the exhaustion, something else pulsed, an unsettling certainty that whatever touched the barrier was studying her as much as she was sensing it. She pulled her shawl tighter around her shoulders, feeling the faint hum of magic lingering in her skin. Arlen and Mira hurried to keep pace, their faces pale with worry. Mira held Lyra's hand again, gripping it as if afraid she might vanish. "You shouldn't be alone tonight," the princess said quietly. "If it tries again—" Lyra squeezed her hand back. "I know, but I don't think it will attack until it understands what I am." Arlen frowned. "And that's the part that terrifies me." Lyra couldn't blame him. The growl that had shaken the mountains wasn't like any creature she'd heard of. It wasn't mindless hunger. It was deliberate, searching. They entered the library again, where candles flickered softly and the scent of old parchment filled the air. Theron moved toward a large wooden chest carved with ancient symbols. He opened it carefully, revealing several scrolls wrapped in faded blue cloth. "Our records of the first bearers are incomplete," he said. "But there is one thing we know for certain. They were always hunted." Lyra felt the words settle deep in her stomach. "By what?" Theron unrolled a scroll. On the parchment, inked in dark strokes, was a figure made of shadows, its shape shifting between beast and mist. "They are called the Hallowed." A chill ran through Lyra's spine. The creature's silhouette felt familiar. Too familiar. "Is that what we heard tonight?" she asked. Saris entered the room at that moment, face tight. "Yes. The Hallowed have never approached the Silver Line in centuries. They only come when a bearer emerges." Lyra's breath caught. "Why?" Saris' gaze softened with something like pity. "Because bearers hold the power they fear the most, the power to close every passage they crawl through." Lyra looked down at her trembling hands, suddenly aware of how small she felt inside this ancient story. Theron kneeled beside her chair, placing a steady hand on her arm. "You are not a soldier," he said, "and you will never be expected to fight these creatures alone. Your role is to stand. Ours is to shield." Lyra lifted her eyes to him, surprised by the gentleness in his tone. The king people feared was not the man kneeling before her. He looked tired, protective, even afraid, not for himself, but for her. "The Hallowed know your presence now," he continued. "Their next move will be swift." Lyra inhaled slowly, grounding herself with the scent of burning candles and old ink. "Then we prepare," she said. "Tell me what I need to do." Mira leaned against her side, relieved but still shaken. Arlen's jaw tightened as he stepped forward. "Tonight showed them you're strong. Now we show them you're not alone." The words steadied Lyra more than any magic could. She nodded firmly, feeling the fear settle, still present, but no longer paralyzing. She had people beside her, and that made her dangerous to whatever lurked beyond the mountains. Theron closed the scroll. "At dawn," he said, "we make our stand." And for the first time since arriving in the fortress, Lyra didn't feel like a mistake in someone else's story. She felt like someone the darkness itself had noticed and feared. Dawn crept over the mountains with a pale, cautious light, as if even the sun feared what might be waiting beyond the silver line. Lyra stood on the fortress balcony, staring at the horizon where the barrier pulsed faintly, thinner than before, trembling in a way that twisted her stomach. She wrapped her arms around herself, trying to absorb the cold morning air and quiet the rush of her thoughts. Below, soldiers moved in coordinated lines, preparing weapons, reinforcing gates, checking armor. None of it was for show. Every movement carried the unspoken truth. Something was coming. Mira joined her first, slipping her small hand into Lyra's. Her touch was cool, grounding. "You didn't sleep," the princess murmured. Lyra didn't deny it. "I kept hearing it. The barrier. Calling." Mira leaned her head against Lyra's arm. "Then you answered. That's what bearers do." Lyra wanted to believe that, but doubt still flickered like a restless flame inside her. She had lived a life of ridicule, not destiny. Accepting that she mattered now, so deeply, so dangerously, felt like stepping into a world too large for her feet. Yet she didn't pull away. "Before we continue, tell me in the comments what you think will happen next, and if you were in her place, would you stay or run? Don't leave the video, because what comes next will give you chills." Arlen arrived moments later, his expression tense. "Father wants us in the hall. He says the Hallowed moved again. Closer." Lyra's breath caught. "How close?" Arlen hesitated, then answered, "Close enough that the barrier rippled." Lyra felt a shiver run down her back. They descended through the fortress halls, where torches burned brighter than necessary and the air tasted faintly of smoke and metal. The closer they came to the Hall of Echoes, the more Lyra felt the tug in her chest. Stronger now, more urgent. The barrier wasn't just calling, it was afraid. Inside, King Theron stood beside the glowing map, the lines flickering like a dying heartbeat. Lady Cerys unrolled a fresh sheet of parchment covered in symbols and hastily drawn lines. "The creatures gathered here," she said, pointing to a point near the northern pass. "They're forcing pressure at the weakest seam. If they break through—" She didn't finish the sentence. She didn't have to. Theron turned to Lyra, his expression grave. "You will not face them directly, but we need you at the core. The barrier stabilizes only when you're present." Lyra nodded, forcing herself to breathe evenly. She walked onto the glowing lines. Immediately, the barrier reacted, flaring to life like a wounded animal recognizing its guardian. The light grew steadier, brighter, but it still trembled beneath the surface. "It's scared," she whispered. "I can feel it, like it's bracing for something it can't stop alone." Theron placed a hand on her back, steady and warm. "That is why you are here. You are not just its anchor. You are its calm." Suddenly, the hall trembled. A deep boom echoed through the mountains, followed by another, closer. Soldiers rushed inside, breathless. "Your Majesty, the silver line is splitting!" Lyra gasped as a violent pulse hit her chest. She felt pain, sharp, cold, shocking, radiating from the barrier. Mira cried out and grabbed her arm. Arlen stepped closer, ready to catch her if she fell. The light beneath Lyra's feet flickered wildly. Theron turned to Cerys. "Open the conduit." Cerys nodded and slit her palm, pressing her blood against one of the ancient stones. A second glow erupted from the walls, red this time, deep and hot. Vampiric magic surged through the hall, intertwining with Lyra's blue light. The clash of energies nearly knocked her off her feet. Arlen steadied her. "Don't fight it. Let it merge." Lyra closed her eyes, breathing through the chaos. She felt the red and blue currents collide, rage against calm, fire against water. She let them run through her, not pulling away, not resisting. The trembling eased, the light steadied. For a moment, she felt powerful, whole in a way she never had before. She opened her eyes. The barrier blazed outward. A shockwave rushed across the mountains, sending trees swaying and dust rising from the distant cliffs. The Hallowed let out a roar so thunderous it rattled the bones of the fortress. But the line held, stronger than before, glowing brighter than in years. The soldiers stared in awe. Mira laughed breathlessly, clinging to Lyra's arm. But then the glow dimmed again. Only slightly, but enough to make Theron's expression sharpen. "They won't stop," he said. "Not until they break in. Or take her." Lyra swallowed hard. "Then I won't let either happen." Inside her fear, something fierce ignited. Not magic, not prophecy, but a strength she had been building her entire life. The strength of someone who had endured cruelty and still learned to stand. And now the kingdom would see it. The fortress braced for nightfall, as if the very stones understood what was coming. Wind swept through the towers in sharp, restless currents, carrying the distant echo of growls rolling across the mountains. Lyra stood in the Hall of Echoes once more, the blue lines beneath her feet pulsing with anxious light. She could feel the barrier trembling, afraid, exhausted, still fighting. King Theron, Arlen, Mira, and the soldiers all moved with quiet urgency, preparing for what everyone knew would be the Hallowed's strongest assault yet. Lyra tightened her shawl around her shoulders, feeling the familiar tug in her chest. The barrier wasn't calling now. It was pleading. As the final rays of sunlight faded, the first impact struck. A thunderous boom reverberated through the stone walls, and the glowing lines on the floor flickered dangerously. Soldiers spread out, weapons drawn. Mira rushed to Lyra's side, fear shining in her golden eyes. "It's starting," she whispered. Lyra took her hand, squeezing gently. "I know." Another impact followed, louder, sharper, and dust drifted from the ceiling. Arlen approached, his jaw tense. "They're not testing anymore," he said. "They're attacking, all at once." Theron stepped to the center of the hall, his cloak swirling like a shifting shadow. "Lyra," he said, voice steady despite the quakes. "The barrier will connect with you as soon as you step onto the core. When it does, don't force it. Don't resist it. Let it rise through you. Let it trust you." Lyra swallowed, nodding. Fear coiled inside her chest, cold and tight. But beneath it, something stronger pulsed, a steady, quiet resolve. She wasn't just reacting anymore. She was choosing. She stepped onto the glowing lines. At once, the barrier surged upward, shooting a column of blue light toward the ceiling. The force slammed into her chest, nearly knocking the breath from her lungs. Her eyes stung as the magic coursed through her, colder, wilder, more desperate than ever before. She gripped Mira's and Arlen's hands, grounding herself in their presence. The room shook again, then again. The Hallowed slammed against the silver line with all their might, and the barrier rippled like a flame battling a storm. Ceres stepped forward, blood already running from a cut on her palm, feeding vampiric magic into the stone conduit. Red light burst through the hall, twisting with Lyra's blue glow in violent spirals. The combined energies roared through Lyra's body, scorching and freezing her at once. She cried out, knees buckling. Mira held her tighter. "Stay with us." Arlen leaned in, voice shaking. "Don't let them break you." Lyra clenched her teeth, breathing hard. Images flashed in her mind, villagers whispering, cruel voices mocking her body, her loneliness, her quiet existence. But another image pushed through. The children's hands in hers, Theron kneeling to reassure her, the barrier responding to her as if she were a missing heartbeat returning home. She drew strength from those moments, letting them fill the spaces where fear tried to take root. With a trembling breath, she opened herself fully to the barrier. It flooded her. Light, sound, vibration, memory. She felt every fracture along the silver line, every strike from the Hallowed, every tremor of panic. She felt the kingdom itself, old and tired, begging not to fall. Lyra lifted her chin and pushed her breath into the magic, steadying it with every exhale. Slowly, impossibly, the wild energy began to calm. The blue glow shifted from frantic flickers to strong, rising waves. The hall brightened until it looked like the sun itself had ignited inside. Outside, the Hallowed shrieked, an ancient, furious sound. But the barrier didn't buckle. It grew. Lyra felt its strength linking with hers, not draining her, not using her, but merging with her. She whispered through clenched teeth, "You're not alone. I'm here." The barrier pulsed at her words, as if answering. Energy burst outward from the hall, rushing across the mountains in a sweeping arc of light. The silver line blazed. The Hallowed roared in pain as the magic seared through their shadows, driving them back into the depths beyond the peaks. One by one, their voices faded until only the wind remained. Silence fell. Then the barrier steadied. Strong, whole, alive. Lyra collapsed to her knees, gasping for breath, the light dimming slowly around her. Mira and Arlen threw their arms around her in relief. Theron approached, eyes shining with a mix of awe and gratitude. "You saved us," he said simply. "The kingdom stands because of you." Lyra looked at the glowing lines beneath her feet, no longer flickering, no longer trembling. For the first time, she saw her reflection in the blue light. She didn't see the girl the village mocked. She saw the bearer the kingdom needed, the woman she had become by standing in her own strength. Lyra rose slowly, supported by the children and the king, and for the first time in her life, she felt truly, undeniably worthy. What did you think of the story? Subscribe to the channel and share it with someone who will also be moved today.